is our pleasure to host Julian Jones today. He is a distinguished fellow of the Schumacher Institute with an honorary post at the Gloucestershire NHS and Cranfield Health. He has extensive experience advising water companies, NGOs, and regulators with hundreds of projects completed since 1977. Julian resigned from his senior water engineer role in 1984 to promote low-cost community-led natural solutions, demonstrating the first full SuDS in 1991 and CaBA proposals in 1993. Julian is presently working with water companies to fit hydro turbines to their asset, and today he will be outlining some obstacles to progress and highlighting the health risks associated with the lack of any microbial standards to the municipal sewage services. So a very big welcome to you, Julian. It is such an important issue, and we are so glad to have you here to address it today. Thank you.
Big thanks to you for inviting me along, and hello to everyone. These are sensitive issues. Public health, obviously, particularly recently, has caused huge effects in our society. I'm even going to touch very controversially on that recent episode, but let's kick off. I'll tell you a little bit more about me. If I can get this launched. Okay, is that working for you?
Yeah, sounds great.
A fairly innocuous weir there on the River Evenlode. No particular reason I picked that other than the fact that it was the only one I had a picture of. A little bit about me as we go into this further. That's me on the left-hand side, very proudly holding a trout that I'd caught. On the right is the late Harry Tomlin, and he was my childhood mentor, both in fishing and also how we engage with the environment. So it was actually his idea, SuDS. I think others also had been working towards this, but in the 1970s, as we fished appropriately in an old hydroponics research station next to the river that the main sewer ran through, Harry said to me, Water Authority must be, I'll cut a few words out, a bit stupid. All they had to do is put the sewage in one end and clean water would come out the other. He also explained to me that fundamental law that we've sort of lost of how you engage with the environment. He stressed to me as a child that every engagement with the environment had to be as an act of being in service. And that's something that we've really lost as a society, but it's coming back, and I'm going to reference some other third parties on that subject. So yes, I went off, I did a brief stint in microbiology in a hospital lab, and then I started working for this remarkable Austrian company, Bauer, family owned at the time I joined them. Again, it was stressed to me, we're in service. That was part of the company ethos. I was very proud of the fact that we could fling manure, sewage, further than anybody else. If you look at that rather poor quality image on the left, you can see a tiny image of a tanker with a huge plume of slurry spraying out of it. Similar going on with that hose reel irrigator with clean water. And we worked in both farming and the water industry. And part of my work through the 70s was transferring agricultural engineering into the water industry, and it went very well. We made great inroads until the word privatization was mentioned. So in 1984, actually at the suggestion of Harry, he was still around then, I stepped out of my high-level post and thought I'd work voluntarily in a community, Stroud, where Harry lived and where I spent my childhood. We'd had terrible public health problems with meningitis, Harry was convinced that it was linked to the increasing raw sewage pouring in at that time, as history keeps repeating itself. There were cutbacks in sewage spending in the run-up to privatisation, and because of the extreme landform around Stroud, the sewers were particularly stressed. In this time, specifically since Agenda 21, Rio Earth Conference, we've worked quite vigorously, certainly diligently. We're no geniuses, but we're competent water engineers, and we're a collective. There's a number of us older folks behind Water 21. Actually, one of our founding directors, when we formalized as a limited company with two limited non-profits, was the remarkable Sue Coppard, founder of WOOF, which I'm sure many of you will know. We've followed not so much community science, but community-led science. So we were dealing with complaints from the community in the 1980s because of sewage overflows. You'll see some of those shortly. And in the time since, we've managed to work with and sponsor and mentor over 50 postgraduate students. I think we've achieved probably more innovations in what we now call nature-based solutions than any other organization. I'm proud to say we've done it voluntarily and funded it all ourselves. We work outside the policy processes, so we never attract government funding. We have some very difficult meetings with various government agencies. We demonstrated the first SuDS in '91. We managed to bring pressure to bear to get the first tertiary reed beds put in '92. We were part of a bigger organization, Vision 21, that did the world's first Agenda 21 strategy. We then spun out of that. The first catchment-based approach in '93. We worked with Severn Trent in producing a storm overflow elimination plan in 2003. Natural flood management, we did a lot of work in that. Just bringing up now a couple of images from that. On the left, you can see catchment planning, one of many overviews in a small 14 square kilometre catchment. Two of our students on the right-hand side, standing in the front of that group, Dr. Adam Broadhead and Ilaria Preto. All our students doing really great work. Nature-based solutions are increasingly understood and appreciated. You can see our take on it 30 years ago on the right. The image on the left, a more recent interpretation, both very similar. The first SuDS demonstration, well, this was an opportunity that the head of technical services at Stroud District Council said he wanted some documentation on how this concept that we'd been pushing would work. Kirsty McColl, the late Kirsty McColl, was a friend, and she was equally concerned. She loved water, tragically died in a boating accident some time ago. We were able to do a show with her. Let's just see a few minutes of that, just to see how far we have or haven't moved since 1991.
New tests have found dangerous levels of toxins in crab meat. Doctors say pesticides are likely to be in most people's tap water. The most serious recent outbreak of sickness attributed to parasitic infection of water supplies.
I'm one of a growing number of people who are losing faith in the water supply. Every time I watch the TV or open a newspaper, there seems to be another article about pesticides getting into drinking water, or about the wetlands drying up and rivers drying up generally in this country. I wanted to find a way to recycle our wastewater that we have coming through this house, because it seems that every time you flush a toilet or empty your bath, the results end up in a local river or on somebody's beach. I love gardening and get really fed up with the hosepipe bans. I wanted a pond anyway, and when I heard a reed bed system could clean and recycle our bathwater, it was the obvious solution to irrigating the garden. That why I decided to save our bathwater and use it on the garden. It goes the normal way down the plug and into the drain pipe, but instead of letting it end up in the sewers, we've channeled it under the lawn to the pond and the new reed bed system. We've got pipes now coming out the house, going under the lawn, up towards the pond.
We've just planted the reeds a few days ago.
We'll make our oceans a bubble bath, so that's a modern ecological aftermath. Beginning with me, beginning with you. Reed beds are so versatile, why aren't they being used more widely? Lack of space was the obvious response from a number of the authorities we spoke to, but there are ways to counteract that. Building the beds up vertically dramatically reduces the amount of space needed. What's the advantage with a vertical process?
It's very much more effective, some 5 times more effective than the horizontal beds that you have around the edge of your pond. This means that you can make do with 5 times less area, and that reduces the cost considerably as well. This sort of system should be used more widely by the formal water authorities in treating sewage, perhaps on a more localized community basis, so that the water can be returned straight to rivers rather than from centralized treatment works, which are normally at the bottom of rivers, often very close to where they exit to the sea.
So, of course, if they were cleaning it up with a system like this, they could put in fairly fresh water back into the rivers, so they wouldn't be polluting them anyway.
Absolutely. The pollution reduction achieved by this is some 99%. We understand that the effluent is clean enough to swim in. It doesn't just meet present EEC bathing standards, but in the future, very tough bathing standards that will come in a few years' time. We're told that the reason water got into this situation was through lack of funds to sort the problems out. This method appears to be some 50% of the cost of those methods presently widely used.
And it doesn't take a lot of maintenance afterwards either. It doesn't take a lot of
very
work,
little maintenance, very little, and of course it's an amenity. It's something that doesn't have to be hidden away and keep the public away. I mean, you've got it here in your back garden. It could be done on a community basis, a series of water parks. People could enjoy it.
Series of water parks that people could enjoy. And I hope by the end of this, you'll share a new vision with me that people could also own and share the economic benefits as well. Anyway, let's get started on this 2006 presentation, The Need for Microbial Standards for Watercourses. I think we would all agree with that now. But in 2006, there was very little comprehension or understanding. Of course, since Kirsty's passing, we've had some really great people jump onto these issues. Fergal Sharkey, of course, a worthy replacement for Kirsty, both coming from the music industry. The fantastic work at WASP. One of the songs that Kirsty sang was called Maybe It's Imaginary, and about all these environmental things, because the authorities always denied there was a problem. Well, through your citizen science, through the work of Professor Hammond, they can't deny these problems. So how is it we have no microbial standards? How can you run a public health industry without microbial standards? Because frankly, it's too awful to think about, and I think that's probably part of the problem. Well, economic expedience is part of the reason. Just an accident of history. But there's an awful lot of forgetfulness and just plain wishful thinking, as well as misrepresentation going on in the way that our water industry is run. This is an interesting piece here. What was it, 2003? The Guardian telling us that the River Thames was one of the cleanest rivers in the world. It's even safe for swimming in. Often thought of a complete no-no by most people. Actually, shortly after this story, Richard Branson announced he was going to build a bathing beach in the centre of London. Well, less than 2 years later, suddenly a different story emerged. that actually the Thames was taking colossal volumes of raw sewage. So, unfortunately, public relations departments probably play a bigger role in all of this and the direction of the industry than any other single factor, because they misinform public opinion and prevent things happening. But as I've said, thanks to the recent brilliant work of the various activists, we've got this message across that our rivers are in a shocking and dangerous state. Here's the former Environment Agency Chief of Staff, John Leyland. I think he's the Chief Executive now. Not to my knowledge, a man with any public health or wastewater engineering expertise whatsoever. And this is another recurring problem. The majority of water company directors now are money managers. No, he was good enough to tell us in 2021 that rivers were not there for swimming and were there for the wildlife, but his organization was perfectly happy to issue licenses for fishermen, boaters, even paddleboarders, I think, all of whom are in direct contact with the water. Let's be absolutely clear. To knowingly allow contact with the pathogenic content of sewage is a criminal matter. And in any other situation than that covered by the municipal function of water companies, there would be criminal charges. And the Health and Safety Executive is quite clear about that and the causes why. What we said in 2006 was that this was primarily a matter of ethics. Who really cares about this? I'm no longer a fisherman. It just saddens me to go near most rivers, let alone spend any time fishing. But I had a vested interest, even if I had to kick up the bum from Harry to get off and do something about it in 1984. I cared because I was a fisherman, but it really is a profound issue. And Georges Monbiot spelt this out very clearly around the time he did his excellent Riverside documentary. Pollution is the physical expression of corruption. So he put it better than me. But things are changing. We've got these fantastic 5 new DEFRA principles: integration, prevention, polluter pays, rectification at source, precautionary principle. Well, it'd be very interesting to see how the water industry would be if and when these are ever applied. They can be, incidentally. The engineering is all there. I'm going to try and touch on that. But we do need this change in public opinion, because grassroots activism is going to be key to changing this. I do see it happening. There is an evolving revolution in attitudes and processes. Those 5 principles, when they're applied, will transform our environment. I think we all know how wastewater infrastructure works. We have long sections of rivers often bypassed by water flow because of abstractions. The water's returned very often in the wrong place, more often than not now polluted. Many storm overflows. At the time we did this, I think we were looking at 25,000 storm overflows. We're now down, I believe, to about 15,000. Interesting point that never seems to get explained. If you reduce the number of storm overflows, you obviously increase the frequency of operation of those remaining. It's very much a matter of basic hydraulics, some of this. Yeah, I think as that HSE statement said, sewage treatment doesn't remove all the pathogens. It removes the solids if it's working well, but there will still be a significant amount of pathogens. And of course, when there's a flood or a malfunction, which is so common now, huge volumes of pathogens are discharged into watercourses and seas. We actually create this sedimentary layer, benthic layer on the bed of the rivers, of these pathogens, they all settle out. So when it rains, there's a short period of self-cleansing and a shockingly dangerous pulse of pathogenic wastewater goes downstream. That's a still from a video in Stroud in the 1980s. Same again there, you can see that dog is stirring up clouds of sedimented sewage while children are playing next to it, throwing a stick for it, so they're in direct contact. Little change since then. Stroud, like many parts of the UK, has numerous weirs. And yeah, I mean, you simply cannot deny that there is an unacceptable health risk coming from weirs with unregulated sewage discharges. Those are aerosols or particulates at a weir, quite a high weir, but during dry weather flow conditions. In wet weather, you would not want to stand next to a weir like that. This fecal droplet or aerosol vector is well understood. Even when you flush your toilet at home, you'll be distributing those in your bathroom. But if you all live together as a family, they're all your bugs, and so you probably won't become ill. I thought this might be of interest. We've obviously recently had SARS-2, COVID. Well, when SARS-1 came along, interesting report from the World Health Organization. Inadequate plumbing was thought to be the likely contributor of SARS. Coronaviruses actually are very commonly transmitted by feces. The World Health Organization meeting concluded that it would be easy to interrupt and avoid some diseases, including SARS, if it was to return. The image on the viruses that can be transmitted by the fecal droplet route include gastroenteritis, adenoviruses, enteroviruses, blah blah blah. Interesting graphic on the right. Incidence of SARS-2 in Japan, exactly coinciding with the monsoon. The moment the monsoon came to an end, the incidence of SARS-2 rapidly declined. Huge subject. I could say so much on it. I'll leave it at that for now. Let's go back to that weir. Well, as the sewage works 400 meters upstream from that weir, there will be innocent people walking along there when it's been raining, and the fecal particulates will be streaming off that weir. They'll be getting on cars as they drive by. There'll be mothers and children getting into direct contact, and so on and so on. This was an excerpt from a paper for the Parliamentary Environment Select Committee by a leading virologist at the time. He announced, and the committee discussed, the fact that sewage viruses survive in the sea for many months. This was the basis of his work. I rang him up and I said, so how about rivers and weirs? There was a long pause at the other end of the phone. And his response was, I suggest you don't even think about that. Incredibly, he then went on to work as an environment advisor for one of our prime ministers. We had a great talk from Elitza at Exeter recently on your platform. And it's great to see the work that she and others are doing, monitoring the incidence of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We've long known that these arise and how they arise. It's all to do with the bacteria being stressed through selective treatment processes. So it's not just the fact that we have a colossal use of antibiotics, it's the situations, particularly sewage works. Again, this is an old paper, it's nearly 25 years old. But as bacteria wind their way through sewage treatment processes, the selective pressures against them increase. So even disinfection will promote microbial resistance. And it's not just microbial resistance. There's a whole load of problems with conventional electromechanical sewage treatment, endocrine disruptors, There's a protein in fish, vitellogenin, that is a marker for, it's a rather unpleasant term, gender-bending fish. This survey looked at 28 sewage works throughout England and Wales. All were creating estrogen disruptors, and the fish were showing up to a 1,000,000-fold increase in this protein. Heavy metals, PFAs, microplastics. Well, in the case of microbial resistant bugs, I'm ashamed and embarrassed to say that I don't have a good referenced academic paper on how a reed bed or a nature-based solution deals with this, but they do very effectively. I only have anecdotal feedback from the various high-level practitioners that I've had the privilege to work with over the years. But as Professor Hugh Barr, who at the time that we put this together was the Dean of Cranfield, said very clearly, and he went through it all with us, a reed bed is pretty much the only solution. Image on the right, it's a 30-year-old reed bed, working great. It's been running at 4 times its design capacity. We've had no problems with it whatsoever, other than prolific compost or soil. So it's whole mass balance exercise. What goes in obviously has to come out. And what you're looking at there is the digger. We've gone in recently to refurbish the bed. It's at a private property. I can't disclose where. It's confidential, but yeah, the population's increased 4-fold. The client, quite understandably, when I said, well, we've got to double the size of the reed bed at least, he said, no, it's worked fine for 30 years. Anyway, it's enabled us to come up with some further innovation that we hope will reduce reed bed sizings even further. I spotted this story only yesterday in the New Scientist. Part of the processes, the diverse many processes in a reed bed that work are predatory microbes called bacteriophages or phages that literally gobble up and attack the pathogens. So in a correctly designed reed bed, we can destroy organics and we can retain the inorganics. We don't have time to discuss that in detail. But all around the world, we're faced with huge costs to fix these problems, we're told. 2002, USA Today saying 1,500% increase in bills to fix the sewers in the USA. Storm overflow evidence project in the UK indicated many hundreds of billions to fix it in the UK. Well, I can tell you, as a long-standing water and wastewater engineer, one of the originators of SuDS, they got it completely wrong, totally wrong. They made the simple, fundamental error of costing SuDS solutions in addition to existing expenditure when they should have realized that this can replace existing expenditure. We'll look at an example. So fundamentally, it's a problem of sewer capacity. These are pictures from Stroud in the early days after privatization. Actually, I was very pleased by this. I'll tell you why, because I have a written agreement with the chairman of the water company in 1989 to prevent all sewage going into the river whilst they looked at nature-based solutions to permanently fix it. So the reason those seagulls are, sorry to, we sewage engineers have low standards sometimes, but they're turd bobbing. If you wanted to know what they're doing, that's a manhole bubbling up and the seagulls are having a good feed. And that building behind is the environmental health office for the district council. Anyway, the water company were good to their word. They were stopping it going into the river. And actually, this is what we should be doing. And this provides straightforward paths through to nature-based solutions. And you may say, well, the landowners won't want it. the landowners and the communities can be very, very well remunerated for doing this, whilst we halve sewerage charges at the least. The water company were good to their word. By 2003, they'd commissioned, we went ahead in 93 and did our own plans. You can see the image on the lower left. But 10 years later, managed to get the water company behind it. And we produced proper engineered drawings. We had access to the sewer model. Local authority wouldn't support it. Local party politics is such a can of worms, you couldn't believe it. So more recently in this community, they've had a £20 million sewer refurbishment to achieve resilience. Well, our reed bed solution, when we costed it up in 2003, was about £500,000 to resolve the problem, to stop all surcharges. Probably about £1 million now. I showed our scoping paper to the engineers who built this scheme. They said, oh, let's do that then. We spent, I guess, over a year trying to persuade the water company. But the problem now is that water companies are so highly leveraged against huge debts. They need expensive solutions to maintain their debts. Their costs relate to their profits. So the higher their costs, the higher their profits. They don't want cheap solutions. So yeah, it's a simple matter of hydraulic capacity. That is a very large and very expensive concrete hole that could be vastly cheaper and, I have to say, more safely and reliably provided with dispersed reed beds. That's my scary colleague, Bill. He's part of Water 21. Well, he was the National Rivers Authority pollution control officer who encouraged, I think it's one word I could use, the water company here to put tertiary reed beds in. They're not the best. They're gravel. That's an inferior method, but they've worked well. There's 800 of them now. This water company has built more than all the other water companies put together. So different to this one here, Burford. I've just looked at it on Google. There was a tour of the Burford works for various interested parties, I think last year or the year before. The water company man said, well, the reeds don't do anything. The reed bed's just a gravel filter. Well, yeah, whoever designed this just did not have a clue what they were doing. And when Ash Smith said at the excellent Cotswold Sewage Summit, we don't want loads of useless reed beds. Yeah, quite right too. We don't want loads of useless reed beds. We don't want loads of useless electromechanical sewage treatment either. We want properly designed stuff. This is outrageous, this one. This is a bit better. I think this is Cirencester, talking about their high infiltration reed bed, the largest of its kind in Europe. Well, that's not true. I'm going to show you the largest reed beds in Europe in a minute. Improving, but I can still see huge problems with this. It's based primarily on wishful thinking. Here's a scheme we did, 2010. It's worked fine, saving a small local authority a lot of money in surface drainage charges. Significantly no party political differences, and also significantly women were in charge. I think that also helped as well. This is an interesting one. A school who suddenly started getting bills for £2,500 a month for surface water drainage. We've been working with them for the last 3 years, trying to persuade the water company there is no surface water drainage because they put a SuDS scheme in. Just unbelievable. But that just gives you an idea of the economic value of ponds. So, okay, if the water company doesn't want to put them in, I'm sure that the pond and reed bed wetland here is tiny. It's less than half an acre. You can see it in the centre of the screen there. £2,500 a month for half an acre with a bit of a hole dug in it. I reckon most landowners, local authorities, parish councils, you name it, would love to have some income like that, and very quickly fix the sewage problem in this country on a dispersed small scale. Let's start to wind up now. it's a murky old world. This is another senior member of Water 21, a genius. So he was the man who formally introduced reed beds into the UK. You can see that delegation there on the top left at the ICI reed beds, the size of 7 football pitches, quite a bit bigger than the Cirencester Thames Water project, dealing with effluent vastly more toxic than what you find in a sewer very effectively. It's actually sequestrated 17,000 tons of carbon in its first 30 years of operation, and it still has another 70 years projected. Lucian was part of the Kickoff team, who in 1984 invited the WRC to see their work in Germany. WRC reported, works very well. In their report, they estimated costs between 25 and 75% lower than conventional. We can now take that quite a bit further. It's better than that. The key difference, or the issues here, these are soil-based reed beds, they're not gravel. So it's really only with soil that you can get the proper microbiology, and also importantly, the surface area. Soil particulates produce vastly greater surface area for this microbial activity than gravel. Here's one that we did for Stroud. Waris Dirie, the at that time UN and African Union ambassador, was good enough to promote this scheme. We weren't able to build it. The local authority said we had no technical competence. It was raw sewage in a ditch. At privatisation, 30% of Gloucestershire was unsewered. It would have cost at that time 25,000, and we could have produced all the village's domestic energy as a biomass crop. What they got instead, and I showed this to Severn Trent subsequently, my estimate of the £500,000 for a pumping station was far too low. It cost over £1 million. They're just wasting energy, pumps break down, certainly wasting money. So we couldn't build it in Stroud, but through the good offices of Waris, I happened to meet a Sudan Interior Minister's wife to discuss gender equality in Sudan, and we were talking about the forthcoming development of oil, and got my drawings out that I've just shown you. I said, I reckon we could treat all the oil waste. One of the big problems with oil exploration is the shocking amount of contamination in the local environment. There's Lucian talking to the local poacher. So just as we laid out in the previous project, reed beds, biomass, a lake filling at that time, there are 9 of these now. I'd like to say working, but unfortunately, they work, but the oil industry brings all sorts of problems with it, notably corruption and civil wars. So right now, this whole thing is shut down. There's a 1,000-kilometre pipeline that's full of oil that's gone solid. They don't even know how they're going to fix that. And in the case of South Sudan, that's 90% of the country's income lost. But we've been able to provide drinking water when operating for hundreds of thousands of people out of previously contaminated oil waste. That's a graphic that shows how we can clean oil waste with reed beds. The other great thing is the biodiversity. So these are all pictures of the biodiversity in the oil field treatment beds. These are mostly animals that have just volunteered. As I say, 9 of them in Sudan. So let's just look at the wealth aspects and this in-service aspect. Some great work going on at Oxford University. I think you've had Professor Natalie Seddon speak to the Oxford Catchment Group. She's coming out with some really clear statements. We must be, as Harry told me when I was a kid, in service of the web of life. She puts it very well. She also explains that this needs to come from the bottom up. Nature-based solutions are increasingly accepted. They're seen as a great corporate investment, carbon sequestration on farms and all the rest of it. This is another huge subject for another discussion. It's all back to front and inside out, and you should not be surprised that according to recent reports in the last year or two, the majority of carbon credit schemes applied in this corporate finance way don't work. A bit like reed beds for water companies. They just don't work. So what's going on here? Well, we need to look at the work of Elinor Ostrom, in addition to Professor Seddon. Elinor Ostrom passed away in 2012, but she was a Nobel Prize-winning economist. She stated very clearly that local communities are best at managing their natural resources, as they're the ones who use them, and they're the ones who are best at regulating and operating them. So her analysis of economic governance led to a concept called the commons, or commons ownership. I'm very excited to say this is getting underway. We've got the Stroud Commons, and they're pushing very hard now to really establish this ownership of these local vital assets, these vital services, to return them to community ownership, and as a paying investment, incidentally. Yeah, so I think that's probably a good point to finish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian. I mean, I've got lots of questions, and I'm sure other people have too. So we're going to open up the floor to questions. If you'd like to raise either your virtual hand or your real hand, if you pop your webcam on, then I will try and get you to ask questions. Julian, you've got your email address on the bottom of this slide as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I just clicked it off.
No, that's fine. We can pop it in the chat as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we run out of time for questions, are people able to contact
you? Of course,
you?
no, absolutely. We're an in-service organisation, so we're here to engage with people, of course. Yeah, I mean, I just say within the limit of the resources we have. So. No,
thank you so much. And there's going to be quite a lot of food for thought as well. I think trying to digest all of this information is going to take a bit longer. Remember, we have recorded this, so it will be on YouTube for you to watch again later as well.
Okay.
Has anyone got any questions? No.
I hate to say, stunned silence is best.
Well, okay.
Oh, Angela and Rosie have both got their hands up. Angela, you first, please.
Sorry, Rosie, you might have got there before me, but yeah, hi. Sorry, I only came in halfway through. I had a problem with the password, but I'm sorry, I didn't see half of it. I'm a GP, and my other half's a paediatric infectious diseases consultant. So, I mean, my main thing was, have you looked at any work around hospitals and actually specifically working carefully on their sewage wastage, given the breeding ground it is a bit for infectious diseases, and also around you might have already talked about this, sorry, but around factory farms, I suppose, which obviously we'd prefer banned, but any specific work we can do.
I mean, there certainly is. In the case of factory farms, of course, we must be working towards shutting them all down. Yeah, I mean, as someone whose early career was which you missed, where I explained this, I was responsible for the supply of the wastewater slurry treatment for many of these huge farms. It can be used safely. You missed the screen of me in 1982 with a computer advisory service going around telling farmers, one of the first in the UK, how to spread their waste on fields. Certain soil types can only take a certain amount. But preferably, and going further forward, we must compost all waste. It's as simple as that. And the composting process is a great way of dealing with these bugs. Yeah, it's a huge subject. I could go on and on. I think I better leave it at that. In terms of hospitals, I haven't. I have engagement with NHS, not so much for a few years, but the specifics of looking at the wastewater of a hospital, I mean, yeah, a properly designed reed bed would be perfect. Yeah, we actually think we can produce antibiotics in reed beds as a natural response to the toxins and the pathogens.
Fab. Rosie, we'll go to you next.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just put my hand up because I thought nobody else was asking questions, and I feel like I've got so many questions that I don't know if I can frame it as an actual question rather than just a sort of wow. But thank you very much. I was actually one of those people at the Burford, well, I think there were two, yeah, when going around with Ash and others, and just going, but this looks like the bottom of my goldfish tank. It's exactly what it was. They were just catching everything in the gravel at the bottom. So, you know, but no, what I really want to ask about, I suppose, is how do we get from here to there? But that's a huge question. But it's like, what scale are we talking about? Because I was thinking, you know, I think whenever I'm on, you know, with, you know, any sort of river protest people, I sort of think, but nobody's actually talking about the real things. It's as if, you know, when people are, you know, I mean, brilliant show on Sunday, but you know, when I see people walking around with poo on their head, I think to myself, well, what are you actually saying? You know, the fact is we've got to, it's almost like we have to face up to our, you know, we have to face up to our emissions, you know, in terms of poo, as much as we do to our emissions. We have to accept that really by flushing it all away and thinking it's just going to disappear. A lot of people, and nobody present, I know, but a lot of people who are protesting about sewage in rivers don't understand that, you know, if treated effluent didn't go back into the rivers would actually be empty because the water's coming out of the rivers in the first place in order to go into the taps and flush the toilets. So, you know, they're not really seeing a systems-wide as a systems-wide thing. And so I'm really glad to hear composting coming up, because it seems like, you know, that's got to be the way forward. But, you know, I mean, I've seen some sort of smaller indoor, these things with cassettes in, which people are now promoting as an alternative to a flushing toilet, which perhaps people would find more acceptable. But on the reed bed, okay, I'll just shut up for a minute and go back to one specific question. On the reed beds, which is the best scale? I mean, is it like a village should have a reed bed? Should a street have a reed bed? Ideally, or is it because we're starting from where we are, we want to get existing sewage treatment plants to add reed beds in first, or is it just all of it? I mean, how do we do this?
As a long-standing wastewater engineer, I assure you several things. First of all, a correctly designed reed bed. I showed briefly, admittedly, a reed bed producing, I called it soil. It's actually compost.
Yeah.
That is just the natural function of a vertical downflow reed bed. And the big mistake that was made at Burford was they didn't put one of those in before the horizontal flow reed beds. I don't know why, ignorance. Did they not want the bother of lifting the compost off every 5 years? Who knows? I mean, bluntly, I think water companies are just too big, as well as being run by people without the technical competence to do it. In terms of scale, yeah, I mean, I showed the one at the large private house. I can't disclose who operates it, who owns it. You might know. But it's a simple, reliable technology. That one was planned for 50 persons 30 years ago. It's operated at 200 persons. But the ideal is probably in that range, between 50 and 5,000. This silly criticism of reed beds that we've had so many times, oh, there isn't enough space. There's ample space. These are extraordinary biodiversity reserves, of which we need many more. It's a fantastic diversification for farmers. It's a fantastic source of income for local authorities. And what I didn't explain, WRC, this former Guardian Water Research Centre, they used to be called the Public Wastewater Research Board or something like that. They were privatized along with the water companies. So it isn't just that we've had totally useless regulators, but this amazing organization that existed to research best least cost technology in the public interest. They were actually given to the water companies. They were the main shareholders up until 2020. So we lost all that independent view. If you go to their website now, they're talking about offering technologies that increase revenue and profits, not that reduce costs and improve social equality, which is what they used to do.
Sorry, what did you say?
Sorry.
What was the name of the research organization when it was independent?
The water. I mean, if you look WRC up on Wikipedia, okay, you'll find the history. But that, you know, Rosie, I think we've corresponded a few times on email, but possibly, unless there's another.
Yes, I was given your name by somebody who came to a water day in Whitney.
That's it. And then you tried to engage with the former commander Aylard.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he actually used to work at the site where that reed bed I showed was installed. That gives you a clue as to who owns it. I have to respect confidentiality. Okay. But yeah, I mean, so he knew damn well, I would have thought, about this technology. But this is the point. WRC was seriously, and the water companies were seriously threatened by this technology. It destroys their so-called natural monopoly. Of course, it's not a monopoly. We need a myriad diligent actors to get out there and fix this horrendous, not just health, but also carbon problem. We waste huge amounts of energy on these failing electromechanical sewage treatment works. Reed beds don't need any energy. They do it all with sunlight.
Can I jump in there, just because I'm very aware on time?
Okay, just one final point. Okay. What did WRC do in the run-up to privatisation? They got a 30 million euro fund to basically dumb down reed beds. So we've been dealing with that ever since. Yeah, anyway, sorry. It's a real can of worms here.
That's fine. Matt, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to ask a question? We've got a few minutes. Oh, you're on mute. Matt, if you can hear me.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Hi there. I only caught the second half of your talk as well, but I found it very interesting. I was just wondering, I've been experimenting with floating reed beds because I make wildlife ponds for people, and was recently asked to try and improve the water quality of quite a large lake. We looked at doing a reed bed and it was going to be too expensive. And so I decided to experiment with making a floating wetland system and then connect it up, so two sets of islands and pulling water from one to the other. Is that something that's done much in sort of an industrial level?
Thanks for that question. I mean, it's been tried. One of the water companies that has got some of these going. I hate to say it's sort of analogous to sort of dropping the oil filter for your car rather than having the oil all coursing through it, just somehow just dropping it into the chamber under the crankshaft. A lot of the oil is just going to miss it. So I hear your problem in terms of lake. There may be some other things that you could do. If you want to drop me an email, I'd be pleased to pick up in detail on this. I mean, let me say, what you're doing is not a waste of time. You're creating some great biodiversity there, some extra habitat, you know. So that's certainly worth doing. And all these things, you know, there are pros and cons.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm wondering really quickly, are there any workshops, or how can people become educated on how to use create reed beds, I guess?
Well, this is an area where we've been lacking, but you know, when I did that BBC program, I mean, every time we get an opportunity, I only took this up to do a few years and then go back to a proper paying job. So whenever an opportunity comes up, like that BBC show I showed at the beginning, that ended up costing us £20,000. So at any time, I'm unwaged. So these sort of debts, when we incur them, leave me financially crushed and unable to sort of do the follow through. And there's always more powerful commercial entities who pick up the things that we and others promote. But you're totally right. We do need follow-up, and we have offered actually to do this for the great folks at Cirencester following the Cotswold Sewage Summit. Both Dr. Lucian Gill and myself have offered to do this, and we would love to do a half day with an expanded version of this. And I recommend you get Lucian to come and give you a more detailed talk. Yeah, I mean, pretty much there's nothing he can't clean up with reed beds. And he's just kept out of it by powerful commercial forces. He's retired. He's 79 now, so be quick.
Need to get that information shared, sooner rather than later. And I was just wondering quickly about the seasonality of the riverbeds. Come winter, is there a decline in their ability to process these things, or are they pretty much 100% 24/7?
Yeah, Dr. Gill has built them in northern China, operating, I think, at minus 30. The issue is the distribution, but to get the effluent into the bed, but it's all subsurface activity, and that solar energy at 500 watts per square meter at the height of summer basically powers up the whole ecology, subsurface as well, to keep it going through the year and to create that beautiful compost. I mean, it really is crazy when in this era where we're being told we've got to have carbon capture and storage, that we're ignoring this method. 17,000 tons of carbon the ICI reed beds have sequestrated.
I've got one quick question from Mary. She says, thank you so much for this insightful session. She's on the move, so she's not able to join us on camera herself. She says, are subsoil reed beds referred to at all in the text of the Climate and Nature Bill?
Not as far as I'm aware. I mean, listen, we occasionally get to engage with high levels of government. Our last meeting at their request with, I better not name the agency, but the heads of department of the appropriate government agency left us, they said, oh, we're spending a lot of money on SuDS and reed beds and all the rest of it. Left us totally stunned. I mean, we went in there, Lucian and I, we told them what we can do, what we have done, and we didn't necessarily expect to get any research funding. The point being, we've done all the research, but we wanted to work with others to validate it. They gave the funding on the phosphate removal to a water company. Again, it better remain nameless. Just let me state, we can do 99.5% phosphate removal, no trouble. This has been known since 1984. They gave it to some academic who had no experience in reed beds for sure. It's been in and running a few years. They're achieving 29% phosphate reduction. I mean, we're just moving backwards in all of this stuff.
But what about getting into the the Environmental Audit Committee and getting to some of the MPs? Particularly, I would say the Green MPs.
Anything like that.
Ellie Chance would be absolutely delighted to hear from you.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Be pleased to engage wherever we're invited, and again, if our resources enable it,
Yeah.
Like I said, this will be recorded, so as soon as it's up and live, feel free to share it with anyone who'd be interested.
Thank you very much.
We are going to wrap
up, but yeah.
No, I think everyone's done. I've got questions. I know Jennifer's got questions, but I will email them to you, Julian.
Matt still has his hand up. I don't know if he had another question.
Sorry.
No,
I think no, it's all right. I don't know how to do it.
Okay.
I'm always pleased to follow up. As I say, I hope and bear in mind, we're just an Agenda 21 organization. All we do is what Agenda 21 called for at the Rio Earth Conference. It called for this voluntary work. And we share as much as we can. There is some proprietary stuff that belongs to other third parties. that we can't, but we can introduce you to those people. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up. I've got one quick question, Julian, is what is your favourite or inspirational book?
Okay, thank you for that question. Well, my most inspirational book, this was given me when I was 15 years old, was or is The Complete Angler, published in 1653 by Isaac Walton, supposedly a linen draper, but no such thing. The book and he was one of the most subversive in our country's history. You have to read it to figure it out, but it ends with the statement, "Study to be quiet." So and it was published at the height of the Puritan repression in this country. It's a sort of early work on Zen meditation, actually, saying go fishing, better times will come. And we haven't got Puritan fundamentalism that we're fighting. We're fighting materialist fundamentalism, so similar times.
Thank you. And thank you again so much for your fabulous presentation and your time and your answers to questions. We're so grateful.
Anytime.
Thanks very much.
Well, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.